I wasn't sure she was finished. I wasn't listening a bit. My name is John. I'm an alcoholic. Let's start this with a prayer, if you don't mind. God, please help me set aside everything I think I know about you. Please help me set aside everything I think I know about my disease and my recovery. Please open my heart and my mind and my spirit to a new experience with my disease, my recovery, and especially you. Amen. Sheldon, thank you for showing up. A couple minutes ago, I turned to Mike Allison and I said, I do not have an hour on 6 and 7. I can pretend for about 20. But after that, Mike said, no, I'm not doing it. But it's definitely good to follow you because yesterday your message was just incredible. It really touched me, and I'm grateful for that. You know, we made the mistake yesterday of trying to talk about 1, 2, and 3 in an hour. You know, and I think we got halfway through 2 between the two of us and talking. I love the title of yesterday's workshop of oh God, not more of this God stuff. And yesterday when. The extent of our preparation for these 3 workshops was 90 seconds yesterday morning. Sheldon said, we're going to talk about the flyover steps, which is 6 and 7. And I thought, well, not for a guy like me. They're all flyover steps. I so resonated with all the speakers this weekend. And at first I want to just say, again, thanks to Steve for asking me, because it really has plugged me in well. I've received much more than whatever I gave in my 24 minutes yesterday. Without doubt, I received much more, and things like these, I used to go to some of these things, and it's like, well, who's speaking? Am I going to go? Oh, it's Charlie P. Screw that, I'm not going to that. But Katie's talking later, I'll go to that. And always trying to. But really, what makes this, at least for me, an incredible weekend is you guys, this pocket of enthusiasm. It's just whatever, how many people are, a few hundred people in here that are seekers, after the same thing, and I was really moved by that candle ceremony that we opened with. My first time here, I was a little worried we were going to get the Ouija board out and try to get Bill out of the floor, but because where I come from Maryland, there are way too many lawyers. They would not have done the whole open flame bit, right? All I could think was, the newcomer up there shaking with its candle. I just want to stop, drop, and roll, stop, drop, and roll, stop, drop, and roll. Be prepared, if he catches fire, I'm not putting him out, But it's really, I've received so much, and I mean that from the bottom of my heart. This, what I resonated with what Katie was talking about last night is and I get embarrassed to say it from the podium sometimes, it took me 19 years to fall in love with the big book. Of course I read it, when I ruined my life at 19 years of sobriety, my sponsor said, all right, look, the new sponsor I'd found, you've obviously done some work because you've stayed here, right? But my MO was, I will do just enough, to stay alive, right? I got this idea of, I had no problem with this idea of powerlessness, and I can never drink again. Took me 6 years of drinking and drugging to figure that out. And if I was any brighter, I'd have figured it out in 6 hours, because from day one, as I told you, I was an instant alcoholic. But, when I got here, I had this kind of, and I think a lot of it is age, right? I think some things, not age of sobriety, but just age of life, right? You can't tell a 19-year-old that you need a spiritual awakening. You can tell them, I'm talking about me, right? I could kind of grasp that. I believed in God. As I told you, I kind of believed he, was pretty pissed at me, and I could never get the scales back to zero. But this whole idea of living this spiritually balanced, spiritually seeking life. Yeah, great. But, I need a better job. If I could just get a better job, then I can get the better place. And if I can get the better place, I can, get a better car, and then I could get, her, And maybe the holy trinity of Alcoholics Anonymous, right? A car with a license plate that matches, and insurance, for a number of years in here, I just was going down the apartment complex and getting a set of tags that had good stickers on them. I didn't see anything wrong with that. And when, 5 years of sobriety, my first wife left, thank God. Of course, I thought it was the end of the world, I got spurred back into some more step work. My first version of the fourth and fifth step was kind of a treatment center that looked nothing what our book talks about. And my second attempt at four and five was anything but searching and fearless. It was shallow and cowardly. I just wanted the pain from the divorce to be over. And my wife left on a Monday, and Renee showed up on a Wednesday, and the pain was over. It's a true story. It's amazing we're still together. She gets all the credit for that, for sure. So I dove back into another fourth and fifth step, and I did the best I could. And when I came out of that, it was an incredible experience. Even being shallow and cowardly was the best I had. And we just glazed right over 6 and 7. He started talking to me about amends, and I didn't dive right back into the amends. I had such euphoria from this 75% fifth step for the first time in my life. I'm not riding this out, Jack. I'm not, right? I'm the guy that loses 30 pounds and hits the Dunkin' Donuts, right? I don't need to get to the 40-pound mark, let's just, I'm a tread and water type of guy. And that's in hindsight. I'm not consciously doing that, I get a little bit of relief, and that was painful, but now I'm good, I got this now. And, for a long time, I thought the 6-step read, we were partially ready to have most of these character defects removed. Because I'm serious. I'll get rid of most of them, especially the ones that are keeping me from getting what I want. The ones that are blocking me from getting the mansion and the Mercedes. Because I delivered pizza for 47 different businesses in my first year and a half of sobriety. My first nickname was, I'm not going to say it, but it's not that. Pizza John was my name, and there's so many great nicknames in AA. How the hell do you end up with that? You know what I mean? But the guy who created it is dead, so it stopped spreading. Thank God. Yeah, thank God for that. So, I forgot where I was going down that rabbit hole. This idea of just the ones that were keeping me from a mansion in Mercedes. That's where I was. Thank you. One of my other committee members told me where I was. Because if I could, because I'm working this job, I was delivering these pizzas, and then my sponsor said, look, I got married really early at 20 years old. I'll tell you a lot what my early sobriety looked like, and then I'm going to move on. So I had about 18 months of sobriety, and restless, irritable, and discontent. I'd done this crazy little 4-step with a sponsor that was nothing like our book I told you about. And my life was completely unmanageable. I'm just dying inside, right? If we talked about it yesterday, if quitting drinking solves your problem, you're probably a problem drinker. But if quitting drinking causes a lot of problems, you might be one of us. And that was the case for me, because I was getting worse, not better, as the time clicked on. And so the first Gulf War broke out in 1990. I had about, 20 months of sobriety, something like that. And I had a really bright idea. I said, because I come from this long list of military heroes. My grandfather was a 2-star admiral. All the others went through the Naval Academy, I said, I'm going to join the service, and I'm going to be a war hero. And I wasn't brave enough to get in the infantry, so I knew that it was a desert war, so I'll join the Navy. I am a coward by nature still today, let me tell you. And so, but this is what my early sobriety looked like. I went and I joined the Navy, and then I went and talked to my sponsor and asked him if he thought it was a good idea. Right? Like that's my whole early sobriety, right? Like ready, fire, aim, right? And so, if you remember, that war was over in 7 days or something like that. You know, it was like Schwarzkopf or whatever his name was, just, you know, turned the desert into glass, and it was over. And so by the time I was due to be shipped off in 6 months or something, the war was over. My visions of grandeur were long over. And I showed up in boot camp, and you know, they shave your head and ship your stuff home and march you for 48 hours, no sleep for 48 hours. And they bring you in this big auditorium about this size. It's called the Moment of Truth Day. And everyone's just sitting Indian style. And, you know, literally I'm nodding out like, you know, I'm on Suboxone and drooling, and this guy comes in, he says, all right, today's the Moment of Truth Day. If you lied to the United States Navy, we're going to find out, and you're going to get a dishonorable discharge. It'll stay with you the rest of your life like a bad venereal disease. And he says, you've lied about your drug use, going to that corner. If you lied about being arrested, going to that corner. If you lied about psychiatric care, going to that corner. If you lied about something else, going to this corner. Well, I got a question, right? I swear I rose my hand. That doesn't go over well in boot camp, right? And he was so dumbfounded, he called on me, and I said, you know, well, where do you go if you lied about all four? And he said, you come with me. And so they put me in the Navy brig for 14 days and sent me home. So, like, of my own power, of my own making, the best I can do is serve my country for 48 hours, right? Like, and this is how delusional I am. So, you know, they sent me home, and the first victim I could find, I married, and took her hostage right away, and it was just crazy sickness. You know, I'll tell you how delusional I am. It was like about 6 months after that, we'd gotten married, you know, or we were about to get married. We're talking about housing and stuff, and I thought, maybe I can get a VA loan.
I love you.
Man, you understand what I'm saying, brother? I meant it. On Veterans Day, do not call me and thank you for my service, right? I'm embarrassed to tell you this. I'm a Redskin fan, and or whatever they call themselves these days. And during November, they put out, all the NFL teams put out these green pullovers, and they have American flag on them. And my son and I were at Chipotle, and the guy goes, "Oh, you're a veteran, you get a discount." I said, No. Like, I don't want to make amends for that discount. And my son's like, "Yeah, he's a vet." You know, my son, you know, because my son knows the story. I flew over the 6 and 7 for a long time, and the reason why I flew over 6 and 7, like, is because my 4 and my 5 were weak. In hindsight, right? Like, if you're struggling with any step, it's the previous step that's where I got to look, right? If I'm having difficulty turning it over, right? We all sponsor people that say that. It's because my conception in the second step is weak. Right? I'm not going to turn it over to a God that's keeping score that's, you know, not big enough to solve my problems. Why would I? I'll take the chances on me, right? So, you know, 6 and 7 weren't that big of a deal because my 4 and my 5 were, you know, frothy at best. But when I train wrecked my life, and I did a real, I don't say real, because they're all good, right? I mean, you can't do a bad inventory. I believe that, right? It's going to get you to the next one, you know? I don't like that layers of the onion statement, but it is. But when I really got clean with another human being in the 5th step, and really honestly took stock, as it talks about in the 4th step, I had no choice but to fully surrender, right? I got this smoldering pile of rubble in front of me at 19 years of sobriety, like, I wanted no part of me anymore, you know? I think 3 and, we talk about 6 and 7 a lot together, but 3, 7, and 11 are just different levels of surrender. You know, so if you came here to hear the golden nugget of the difference between character defects and shortcomings, I don't have that. What I do know is that these shortcomings and character defects for me were just emergency responses to life that I didn't know how to handle, right? I heard this guy saying this. They called themselves an AA meeting, but it wasn't an AA meeting. It was more like an AB meeting. But he said, I want to go on to the 8th and 9th step, but my sponsor said I can't do that until I get control of my character defects. And I went like this. I was waiting for lightning to hit the building. You know what I mean? Because that's still holding on this old idea that I can fix me. I've already surrendered that idea. I mean, look, if we could fix ourselves, would any of us be sitting here right now? I know where Mike and Darren would be right now. And I'd be with them. Good overcast morning, a little bit longer morning bite. I mean, that's almost better than you know what. I mean, almost. Certainly lasts longer. So this 7th step is just another pushing all the chips into the middle of the table. I'm just done. But where the relief comes from them is by going on with the rest of the steps. We've all heard that analogy of 3 being, you want to take the 3rd step, do the rest of them. That shortened version of it. I think 3 is a little bit more than that. I think 3 is a really recognition that the rest of my life is none of my business. And going on makes that possible, right? I mean, just making a decision doesn't do me much good. So these emergency responses to life, once I do the rest of the steps, I outgrow the need for these character defects. That's what happens. Those are just cracks in the armor, of self oozing out is what they are. And equally as so, I can equally drift off of the program no matter how much time we have and pick up those tools again, right? Katie talked about telling that little lie last night with 400 years of sobriety, right? It's like, it does not take long for us to do that. This desire to satiate self for a guy like me is a lifelong battle. My wife and I are in the process of picking between 2 houses, and you want to talk about self poking its ugly head up, you know what I mean? Because she wanted this house and I want this house, you know what I mean? And that can be fun, But what,
when are you signing for the house she wants?
We already did. It's funny, I was doing some service work the other morning. I went fishing with Mike, and I started talking to him a little bit about it, and I said, you see the houses going, the house hunt. I said, we're down to 2 houses, and I said, she's like 90% on one house, 10% on the other, and I'm like 60-40, and Mike Allison is, right? He's the best. He just not much, not a long answer, and he just says, in my house I get outvoted 1-0 quite often, But what I'm getting at with that is, what I found, again, in hindsight, after doing the tough stuff, is that if I can surrender 4 things, I'm going to be at a lot more peace. And this came in the 7th step, right? If I can surrender this need to be right, it's so painful. I know half you think, I don't have that, right? Yeah, really? Let me see your Facebook page, right? Let me hear you have a conversation about politics for 3 minutes and see if you have a need to be right. And the reason why it's so dangerous is because it separates us from the herd, right? I mean, the ones that are wrong are just out of the equation. And I learned that the hard way. My sponsor puts on this little itty bitty men's retreat, 30 guys, in November, and we'll have flyers for that later, Scott. Just kidding. Don't tell anybody about this retreat. And my son was on his way to getting his, what was it called? Eagle Scout. It was really Renee getting the Eagle Scout badge. He's like, the rule to get an Eagle Scout, you have to get it done before you're 18. Right? Like 18 a day, you're out. And my son's like me, it's like, I'll do it later. They should have given her the Eagle Scout. I think she got one in honorarium, but so she's like driving in to get this thing done, and the clock's ticking, and we're getting close, and you have to do a service project at the end, and he decided to build this really nice fire pit at a halfway house, which was cool. And I'd been after him, because I started traveling a little bit and I knew my sponsor's retreat was coming up, and I was like after him, like you got to make a plan, you got to do this, you got to do that, And he's like, yeah, I will, And finally, I say, hey, did you pick a weekend to do your Eagle Scout project? He's, yeah, it's November 10th or whatever. And that's the weekend I go to this men's retreat, And I said, man, buddy, I got this thing I got to go to, and you got to do a better job of planning, you got to, this isn't what life's about. You got to be organized. You got to, you can't expect the rest of the world to change their schedules for your lack of planning. I really beat him up, He's like, yeah, you're right, Dad. I know you can't be there. All right, good, I'm right. And so I went to this men's retreat, and I'm sitting in this thing, and I don't want to be there. I'm just dying. I'm not at home with my baby boy, putting bricks in a halfway house, you know what I mean? So all these lessons are, come from pain, right? So the first one is the need to be right. The second one is this need to be powerful. If you don't think you have that, sponsor a bunch of newcomers early in recovery, right? Like, half the calls I get from my guys are from the guys they work with. I told him to call me every day. Okay. You don't think you have that need to be powerful? Join this committee to put on this conference next year. Right? Let's see. One of these will really I'll go ahead. The third one is this need to be effective. I didn't really know what that meant until I showed up at someone asked, a friend of mine runs the Salvation Army down outside of Washington, D.C. Like 300 guys they have in this place. And it was asked me to come down and speak for an hour. The room was this big. And it wasn't mandatory. And 6 guys showed up. And one sat in that corner. And one sat in that corner. Whatever, you get the idea, right? No one was in their front nodding their head, like trying to connect, right? It was like talking to an empty room. It was worse than talking on Zoom, right? And I was messed up by it. Like when I first got there, it was like really difficult, because I had this need to be effective, right? I have a need for somebody to shake their head in the relatively front row, just thank you. Everybody give me a bobblehead, right? I mean, in this room of 300 or 400 people, my ego is looking for the guy that's asleep. You know what I mean? Because I have this need, And this latest one that's kind of become apparent to me is this, I can't possess anything. Like, nothing is mine. When we went broke, about 13, 14 years ago, and I'm going to talk a lot about this tomorrow, Ray and I just made this decision that, none of this is ours. I mean, we had made a decision a long time ago that we were going to have an AA house. It's God's house, right? Newcomers show up at any time, We didn't really have newcomers stay with us for a long time because we had young kids and, so we didn't do that. But after a while we did, had some new guys stay in our house. And it just turned it all over, because, I had this big second surrender and, when the repo man came for my car, I'd rather have had an amputation done. You know what I mean? That's my car, going down the driveway, and it's all ego, right? Nobody in the world gives about what car I drive, but me. Nobody cares. Nobody cares what I make, what I wear. At least the people of value in my life, nobody cares, And so, you start talking about that everything is God's, and you start saying that out loud in an AA meeting, and God, you say that from the podium, God will take you up on it. You know what I mean? Be careful. And where the beginning of this lesson started was, so we started rebuilding our life and coming out of this funk, not just financially, our marriage, everything, and started doing a little bit better, and this girl that worked for me borrowed $500, and single mom, 45 years old, paycheck to paycheck, never, and didn't pay me back. And like every week it was like, I'll get you Friday next Monday. I'll get you $50 next Monday. I'll get you, and I'm getting pissed, and we were getting ready to go on vacation, and I had that $500 earmarked for, something I wanted to do, and she didn't pay, and so I break out the cell phone. You might not get to talk today. So I break out the cell phone, and I start blazing her on a text. You know what I mean? Just, I think that's why I have arthritis now. I mean, it's about that long. It's all caps, like, how dare you? And I finish this text. I'm like, you are stealing from me. You are taking food from my kid's mouth. I mean, I'm and this little voice in the back of my head, God talking to me or whatever, the truth. When the truth is talking in the back of the head, said to me, if everything is God, she can't steal from you. And I said, The good news, I didn't send the text. Right? I mean, my thumb was just twitching, boy. Like, I couldn't wait to send it because I have a need to be right as well, as I told you about. And that was the first part of that lesson. And as some time goes by, I've always had for many years I had difficulty with Renee's mother, my mother-in-law. I know that might be foreign to some of you guys. But the resentment was real. She had a house down in Myrtle Beach, and I'm a golfer. And we used to go down to Myrtle Beach 3 times a year, play 8 rounds in 10 days. I mean, we're golf whores. Like, we'll play anywhere, anytime, with anybody, at any cost, And every time I go down, when the kids were little, they say, hey, did you go to Grandma's house? And I say, I always kind of brushed it off. And after a while, kind of figured out, like, why doesn't, Dad go over there? And so finally, when I was not in a great spiritual space, and they said, Dad, did you go to Grandma's house? And I said, let me just tell you. If I was on fire next to her pool, I wouldn't jump in it, right? So that's the level of resentment that it was, right? And so, as she started having some health issues, Renee and I talked a bunch, and she's like, I know she can't come and stay here. It's just too toxic. Not just me and her, just the whole situation was kind of toxic, And I was like, okay, thank God you understand that, and she can't come here. She can't come here. This is my house. And you guys know where this is going, right? And so she has some big problems, right? I can't even remember the condition, peripheral artery disease. Did I get that? And my wife drives down there in the middle of the night and picks her up from South Carolina and brings her up to this nursing center. She spends a couple months in the nursing center. And my wife says, I want to bring her home to die at our house. And not for a second did I think, my house? Right? That has gone. That was left. I had been relieved of this idea that this is mine, And before she died, I made peace with the woman. And I didn't really, it was no big, great conversation. And how I made peace with her is by serving her. Not like Renee did. I mean, Renee cared for her mom, in a way that only a daughter could. I mean, literally the woman's toe broke off in my wife's hand, right? Like peripheral artery disease, like blood stops flowing and like stuff starts falling off, right? Like, just a glass of orange juice, grilling her favorite little dinner, and just being kind and just, we do a men's retreat in Maryland and she couldn't go up and down the stairs, so she was living or dying in the dining room, and we had to do this big cookout, and she was one of us, and we got 125 people in the front lawn, and she's sitting in the bed overseeing the magic of Alcoholics Anonymous, and there was the year that Howard Polance and Bill Bazance came together, which is, my Bill and Bob, and they went in there and sat with her, and she's like, this is what you all have been doing for all these years, it just brought this love to her, and before she died, she told me she loved me, and I told her I loved her back. But if I take this vision, she can't come to my house, I'm done. So I am going to turn this over to Sheldon, but I'm going to share with you a line that I stole from somebody. in the 7th step, and really in the 5th step, by this transparency that we do, but in 6 and 7, I really learned to welcome my wounds, right? To accept my brokenness. And if I don't do that, I'll have contempt for yours, right? Right? Like, that's Sheldon, he's a whatever, right? Whatever I label him with, I'm instantly separated from him, right? And the reason I will do that is because I can't accept my own brokenness. Yeah. And if I've labeled you as something, I'm separated from you, right? Like, God speaks to me in 90 degrees. And every now and again, you get that great truth, whether that's here or something, But God speaks to me in 90 degrees, right? Down through Katie to me, down through Jimmy to me, And so if I cut out a part of the people because, she's a slut. I can't believe she slept with every new guy in our group, whatever it is, or he's a con man or whatever. Like, whatever I want to label them with, I've been that and I've been worse. Can I take 2 more minutes?
Do I have an option?
No. When Renee was having our second child, this is my favorite analogy. I learned by analogies. When Renee was having our second child, she was in the delivery room, and you guys know what that looks like: stickers and wires and TV screens, and And all of a sudden, the monitor went beep. The baby's heartbeat had stopped. And things get really exciting in the delivery room when that happens. Nurses, doctors come rushing in, and it's like wild. And I'm just like in the back corner, got no idea what's going on. This doctor's getting ready to slice Renee open and do a C-section, save the baby. And this old school delivery nurse, really like elbows this doctor out of the way. Says, hold on, doc. I got this. I'm like, okay. I've heard that before, right? Like, I know what I got this means. And she says, honey, get up on all fours. Okay. And put your hand out here and put your leg out there. And it was like pregnant twister. And in like 60 seconds, the baby's heartbeat comes back on, starts beating again. And my wife lays back down, and baby's beautiful and born. Everything's perfect. She just graduated law school. Sorry about that. I know we don't need any more lawyers. And the next day before we left the hospital, I grabbed this old school nurse and I said, what in the hell happened in there? She said, sometimes right before the baby comes out, they get so scared, they squeeze their own umbilical cord so hard they stop their own heartbeat. And I've got this umbilical cord to God, and that's exactly what I do. That is exactly what I do, right? Like I don't believe I can be separated from that power. I can feel like I'm separated from that power. And what these 12 steps divinely do is each one release a little bit of grip on that umbilical cord. It'd be a better analogy if there was 10 steps or 12 fingers, but you get the idea, right? I love you with all my heart, and I'm grateful to be up here. Thanks.
Hey everybody, I'm Sheldon Fay. I'm an alcoholic. What a great conference. Thanks to everybody, the speakers and the committee and everyone that's so nice, and it's really a lot of fun. I love coming out here, and you guys have Monell's, which it's a win, right? It's a win. So I dig it. I'm really having a blast. These flyover steps for me. I wanted to say something that I have an urge to say. We in Alcoholics Anonymous, we are trying desperately to have a spiritual experience. We're trying desperately to get connected to God and to find a way to, as John says, and I love that analogy, to release the umbilical cord, to allow our birthright, right? To allow this this spiritual experience and this power and this energy, this connectedness and this love to enter our lives. And if any of you have accomplished that, by the way, my hat is off to you, right? I got still got 7 fingers strangling that cord, right? But sometimes in our arrogance, we try to compare our own spiritual experience to others. Isn't that weird? Isn't that weird that my spiritual experience becomes something that I arrogantly look through the lens of to compare myself to you? It's like if you gave me a humility pin. The problem is I'd wear the damn thing, right? Right? I mean, that's what it's like. And we come to conferences like this, and most of the time, most of the people at conferences, you don't give up a whole weekend to go to a conference unless you're on fire for Alcoholics Anonymous. And you certainly don't get up at 9 o'clock in the morning on a Saturday to come to the workshops unless you're on fire for Alcoholics Anonymous, right? You guys are like the choir, right? And I'm just a preaching to the choir over here, right? But it's important that we remember, I think, sometimes, that we're all at a different place in this magical journey. And maybe at this conference we do this. I don't know if we do. I'm going to assume we do. But at most conferences I go to, we will have a sobriety countdown. And what we will measure and what we will celebrate is sobriety time. And is anybody else grateful we don't have a spiritual growth countdown? I sure the hell am. I tell you, I'm the perpetual newcomer. All right? I am the perpetual newcomer if we had a spiritual growth countdown. There's a guy who's long since passed, Clint H. out of California. Clint used to say that Alcoholics Anonymous is about one thing. It's only about one thing. It's about how's it going. How's it going? And if it's going all right for you, and you're doing less than I'm doing, God bless you. And if it ain't going all right for you and you're doing more than I'm doing, well, how can we help you get it to be all right for you? Because this is about being sober, one day at a time, comfortable in your own skin. That's what this is about. And I tell you, I forget that sometimes. Anybody else carry their AA resume in their back pocket? I got mine. Want to see it? I'll whip it out any moment. Show it to you. We can compare them, right? And the problem with mine is that I got a couple of lies on mine because I don't want to lose the competition. Right? I'm a funny guy. Right? Desperate, right? Love the mic, love the podium in AA. Desperate to be famous in an anonymous program. It's a weird deal, baby. It's a weird deal, right? Yet here we are, you know. Oh, thank you so much for the invite. I'm so humbled and honored. What took you so long? Oh, let's just get naked, baby. I mean, let me just show you what's really going on here, right? So anyway, the flyover steps, right? Why the flyover steps? So I get this weird reaction to step 5, right? I do my first step, and we look at my character defects, and my sponsor goes, are you willing to get rid of these, each and every one? And I don't want to hang on to any of them. I'm looking at them and going, hell yes. Let's say the prayer, baby. Let's get them gone. I don't want to be a liar, a cheat, a manipulator. I don't want to be a guy that judges too much. I don't want to be a guy that thinks he's better than everybody. I don't want to be a guy that treats people rudely. I don't want to be that guy. Oh, these are my character defects? Done. Say the prayer, I'm over. Step 6 and 7, flyover. All right? I want to get to something sexy. All right? If you're an active, everyday member of Alcoholics Anonymous, talking about step 4 and 5 is sexy. Talking about 8 and 9, now we're, right? If there was, 4 and 5 are triple X AA, right? 8 and 9, if there was something called 4X, that right now we're getting into weird categories, right? I mean, that's the exciting stuff, right? But 6 and 7, that's milquetoast AA. I don't know nothing. I don't know what, nobody ever says, you ever like have someone come to you with a problem, right? And if you're like me, I'm like Katie, my instant, well, we should inventory that, right? Well, and the truth is we've inventoried it to death. There is absolutely no new information in your inventory. Stop it. Put down the pen. You haven't listened the last 9 times. You're not going to listen this time, dummy, right? But I don't want to say, well, have you really humbly asked God to take it away? I mean, there's no, nah, right? It's milquetoast, right? I want you to write about it, and I want you to go apologize about it, because that is sexy. I come out of step 5, right, with this list of things that's wrong with me. And I'm funny. I don't know about you, right? But you could go online and Google stuff, right? And you couldn't do that. But when I was new, you couldn't do that. But you can Google character defects in recovery, and you can come up with 974 character defects, right? Which I don't have time to pray for, to be honest. Could you imagine if I honestly prayed for 900 characters? It would be 3 o'clock in the afternoon. I'd have to stop praying to, relieve my being late for workness. That's a new one, right? Because I was too busy praying for my lust and greed and everything else to go away. So there's only a couple of character defects that wrongs, whatever you want to call them. Wilson's clear that he just didn't want to use the same word over and over again. You got to love alcoholics. We want to discuss for hours the nuance, right? And Wilson's like, just stop it. Just stop it. How do you know you should stop it? Because he says in the big book, we continue to look for, right? Dishonesty, selfishness, self-seeking, and fear. That's the problem. Now take every character defect and root it back up. Is that character defect really selfishness, dishonesty, self-seeking, or fear? What is it? And that's what I'm plagued with, right? That's what I'm plagued with. I fly over 6 and 7. Yeah, I don't want to be afraid. I want to be selfish, self-seeking, dishonest. I want to give that to God, and I take an hour. It's beautiful. It feels so good. I am now in the realm of the Spirit. Until I get in my car. Because I live in the realm of the Spirit, but you, asshole, the way you drive is a real problem. If you would do step 5 and 6, I wouldn't have to wait at this light while you're on your phone, because it's green and you better move, right? It's your character defects that's making me crazy. I get to work, right, and the boss. Right? Normally he says good morning. He does. Every time I get there, he goes, good morning. This time I get to work and he just walked by in a hurry. You know what that means. I'm getting fired. Somebody said something they shouldn't have said about me to somebody, and now they're like having meetings behind closed doors, and I didn't mean to do that thing, and the thing that they did that I did. I mean, oh my God, now what am I going to do now? I'm not going to be able to pay the rent, and the rent is going to be due, and if I can't pay the rent, she's going to leave. If she leaves, I don't know if I can stay sober. And I'm going to die alone and cold on the streets, dirty. I'll be dirty. People will be bringing newcomers past me as I wither under the bridge. See, that's what happens if you don't do Alcoholics Anonymous correctly. Because my boss didn't say good morning. I'm sitting at my desk like this. It's over. I'm nuts. I don't know if you guys are nuts, right? But I'm completely crazy. When I was newly married, now this goes back to I'm like 2 or 3 years sober, right? And I've done my inventory, and I have asked God in step 6 to remove my fear, selfishness. I've asked Him. I've begged Him. And I meant it, and He has. And I'm newly married to a girl that I like to shoot outside of my category. She's a very pretty girl. And I go home, and I know that she's going to wake up at some point and realize that she married a troll. I know she is. And I'm hoping it's not today. I'm hoping it's not today. And I go home, and she's not there, which is not unusual, because, I let her out the house. You should hear the things I don't say. You get the filtered version. Anyway, so I go, don't look at me like that. So I go, so I go home and I walk in the house and she's not there, and I have to, most days, go and check the closet to make sure her clothes are there. Because if her clothes are there, I know she didn't leave. Because she might leave me, but she ain't leaving the shoes. And I have to walk in the house, I have to go in the closet, look around, the clothes are there. Okay, now I can breathe. Right? And I've asked God to remove my fear. 6 and 7 is this weird deal for me, right? For me, my experience, we go through step 5, we look at these character defects, we ask God to remove them, and then we do them again. And we do them again, and then when we're done doing them again, we do them again. You ever been doing a fifth step with a guy or a gal, and they're sharing their stuff, and you've got your sponsor face on, right? And while they're sharing, you think to yourself, I did that yesterday. I have plans to do that tomorrow. It's a weird place, right? It's where broken people sometimes come to pretend they're perfect. Right? Don't we do that? Right? My favorite deal is that sometimes, and none of the speakers here would do this, but sometimes you'll be at a conference and hear a speaker say, well, about 3 years ago I used to do this. I don't do that anymore now, but about three seems to be the number we lie about. Anytime someone says 3 years ago I used to, they're going to do it the minute they get off the plane, those lying sons of bitches right there. They're ready to rock, baby. I mean, that's just the way that goes. Anyway. So here's what happens in my life, right? I'm about 3 years sober, and I go to my sponsor, and I tell him I think I'm getting worse. I think I'm getting worse. Because the truth is about me is that when I go to work, I'm afraid that they're going to fire me. I'm afraid they're going to figure me out. I'm doing my job. I really am, and I'm a good AA guy. I mean, I'm getting there early. I'm staying all day, right? And I'm doing what they pay me to do, and I'm not leaving till after the bell rings, which normally is called having a job, but we pat ourselves on the back for that stuff, right? So I'm like this good AA. I'm really like doing it, right? I'm doing, and I'm performing well, but I'm afraid they're going to find me. I'm afraid they're going to figure me out. I'm afraid that the guy that's sitting next to me is trying to find a way to undermine me, and I got judgments against him, and I keep going to my sponsor, and I'm inventorying the same stuff. You ever inventory the same stuff? Right? And it always turns out that I'm afraid that I'm not going to measure up. I'm afraid that she's going to leave me, right? And I'm inventory, and I figured out, like, the resentment thing by this time. I mean, I'm mad at some people for something, but after a while in AA, it always comes down to the fact that I'm afraid. Right? And Katie nailed it, right? I'm afraid I'm not going to get something that I want, and I'm terrified I'm going to lose something that I have. Right? And the problem with that is the minute I get something that I was afraid I wasn't going to get, it just moves over to me being afraid I'm going to lose it. And I'm in this cycle of fear. Right? Right? But I just want to tell you that I trust and adore this power greater than myself that I found in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous. About 3 years ago, I used to be terrified. But I'm inventorying, and I go to my sponsor, and I'm freaking out, and he says the weirdest thing to me, man. He goes, I think you have a step 6 problem. I was offended. I said, I've done step 6. He laughed. He said, step 6 for him was the measure of his serenity. Step 1 was the measure of his sobriety. Step 6 was the measure of his serenity. How willing is he to let God remove from him all of the things that separate him from God? Anybody ever say this to you when you were new, or you've ever heard this when the newcomer goes, I can't do step 3, and the old timer says, "Why, you don't have to worry about that, kid. It's only a decision. If you had 2 frogs on a log, and one of them frogs decided to jump off, how many frogs are on the log?" And the newcomer goes 1, and the old timer goes, "No, there's only still 2 frogs on the log because it was only a decision." A frog ever took step 6? You'd hear a splash, baby. It's the action of step 3, right? The question is, how close can I get to God? Here's a weird thing. I heard this in a meeting one time, and it just hit me. We were talking about step 6 and 7. Some guy says, those steps ain't no big deal. And Bill only wrote a couple paragraphs, right, in the big book. And half of one of them is a prayer, for God's sakes. I mean, there's nothing in there. I think that really it's a 10-step program was this guy's pitch, right? But he wanted 12 because it's more of a spiritual number. So he made up 6 and 7, shoved them in the middle, right? This whole. I started thinking, why? The guy's an idiot, but why are there only 2 paragraphs in the big book about 6 and 7? Because my experience is that they are the bread and butter stuff, right? Why only? And I don't know if this is true or not, but this is the thought that occurred to me. The reason that there are only 2 paragraphs in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous about step 6 and 7 is because the entire book is about step 6 and 7. Right? There's nothing else to say. Right? What am I doing here? What's my journey here all about? And for me, my journey is about this. I get here and I figure out that I am powerless over alcohol and I can't stop drinking, right? I mean, I have a guy, a sponsor, who loves to pound the table and say, "You know what the grand prize is, don't you? Sober is the grand prize." And that may not be true at 20 years sober, but let me tell you something. At 20 minutes sober, right? Sober's the grand prize. Right? Let's not undermine sober, for God's sakes. It's a pretty important piece of what we do around here, right? I mean, it is, isn't it? Steps work better when you don't drink. I mean, it's pretty important. I mean, I vote for it, but anyway, right? So step one is where I realize that without God, right? Without 6 and 7, I am powerless and broken. Step 2 is where I say I'm willing to perhaps become willing to look for a step 6 and 7 experience. Step 3 is where I make a decision to have a step 6 and 7 experience. Step 4 and 5 is where I write out and talk about all the things that are blocking me from having a step 6 and 7 experience. 8 and 9 is where I make amends for living a life not in a 6 and 7 experience. 10 and 11 is where I look at my life to see whether or not today I'm in a 6 and 7 experience. And 12 is where, as the poet says, I take a man's hand and put it on the lock that only his hand will open, the doorway to his 6 and 7 experience. It's all we do. And so on a practical way, what does that look like? I don't know. I just want to share with you that one of the funniest things in my life for me that I giggle about is that somebody would pay me to go anywhere, not pay me, but pay my expenses to bring me somewhere to talk about God. I mean, if you were in the middle of my life, you would find it funny, right? You'd be like, really? There's a couple of people, not many. I'm looking around the room. There's like 3 people, right? Carl and a couple of friends from Vegas that are in the middle of my life, and they're laughing. Oh. If the goal here is to turn my brokenness over to God, then the first thing I must do is embrace my brokenness. See, I spent my time in Alcoholics Anonymous early on. It's so funny, you know. I don't know what, you know, I'm 25 years sober, and I don't know what the road ahead is, although looking at John, it's a little scary. But anyway, the first couple of years, right, I'm just surprised I'm sober. All right? I'm just like, wow, this is bizarre, right? 10. You know, just, whew, right? And then the next few years, from like 3 till 10, right, I created, made, cut out, and perfected my Captain AA cape, right? Had all the answers, knew everything, was going to save everybody, you know, I could poke you in the chest, tell you what you're doing wrong, had my AA resume, you know, had put my AA cape. If you are 3 to 10 years sober and you don't have an AA cape, you're doing it wrong. If you're still wearing it at 11 years sober, you're also doing it wrong, all right? So from 3 to 10, I'm like Captain AA, and right? I'm going to become perfect. I'm going to be Mr. AA. They're going to build statues of me, you know. I just wish I was more like Sheldon, you know. It's exciting, right, the future. You can't tell anybody that, because once you put the humility pin on, they take it away from me, which is really dirty pool in Alcoholics Anonymous. That's what they do, right? But from 10 to like 15 or so, or 20, I start to realize that I'm never going to be perfect, and I become properly ashamed of my weakness. And that's where I start saying things like, well, what do you expect? I'm an alcoholic, for God's sakes. Fake humility. I'm just doing the best I can with what I have. It's painful, right? It's painful because we think we're doing something wrong being broken. Right? Somewhere around 20. I mean, I'll talk tomorrow about the last 5 years, but it's been a sugar show. It's been interesting. I will tell you that. The last 5 years have been interesting, and we'll talk more about that tomorrow. But somewhere around 20 years sober, I started to get a sense of humor at my imperfections, which is so important. See, the thing that I have come to realize is that I was shipped from the manufacturer with missing parts. Remember, you know, nowadays we plug everything in and recharge it, but remember 10 years ago when you gave the kids gifts at Christmas and it said on the box, batteries not included? I was shipped batteries not included. What are the batteries? Lack of power is my dilemma. I'm shipped with the ability to connect to the power source, but I'm shipped without the power source. And what is my goal through 6 and 7? My goal through 6 and 7 is to find a way to connect to the power source. This is kind of weird, right? But this is kind of my journey through that, and I'm going to go as quick as I can here, but I come to a realization that I'm never going to be this perfect guy. I keep doing it again. See, that's the problem, right? Is that I keep doing it again. And inventory in my life has been incredibly important, but at some point, it becomes pointless. At some point, I become a scribbler. And here's what I mean by that, right? This is how the conversation goes with my sponsor. This is what happened. I don't need to write about it because I know, I freaking know. I did it again. I know. You don't have to point out to me because stood in the middle of the conversation while I'm poking you in the chest to tell you how to do it right, the voice is going, you're doing it again, stupid. It's like I'm watching myself and I can't stop. This doesn't require inventory. I know. This requires something beyond inventory because I'm doing it again. And I'm getting mad at God. I got to be honest with you, it's kind of not fair. It's kind of, don't you want to like sometimes just go to God and go, look, Pops, I got a question, right? Because seriously, I'm a good AA member, right? I spend a lot of time in meetings. I sponsor a lot of guys. My phone's always ringing. I made those stupid amends you wanted me to make, right? I don't have the Mercedes because I gave the money to them, right? I mean, like, I'm a good guy, Pops, and why aren't you relieving me of these defects of character? Why aren't you setting me free? It's not fair. You're God. You could do it. I mean, I'm kind of pissed. I got to tell you. I know this is like dangerous talk, right? Because then you got to move away when the lightning bolt comes, John. You don't want to get. But I'm kind of right. I'm kind of a little wound up about this, right? Because God. I mean, He's God. He made sunsets and pretty girls. Surely He's got the power to relieve me of my character defects. For heaven's sakes, why am I still doing it again? And don't tell me it's because I haven't surrendered properly. Because I can only surrender as much as I can surrender. Don't tell me I'm doing something wrong. It's not fair. I'm doing the best I can. So why? Why am I doing it again? Now the truth is, okay, that I'm not doing it as much because I'm sober longer. And I'm not doing it as crazy because I'm sober longer. But I'm still doing it, right? Why? You know what occurs to me? You know what I would do if I were ever rendered perfect? First thing, stop praying. Don't need God no more. It may just be the biggest gift that God has ever given me. My brokenness, my imperfection, my squirminess, my continued judgment. All these things that when I was 10 years sober, I just thought if I could just, write the perfect imagery, make the perfect amends, that they'd be removed, and I would just be what? I'd be 3 years ago I used to behave that way, but, right? I thought I'd be that guy. And I want to be until that pretty girl walks by and I'm thinking, oh my God, right? Oh, that guy walks by and I'm thinking, oh, kill that guy, right? Or whatever it is, it goes, right? Why? So, it is my imperfection, my perfect imperfection, as the author says. It is my brokenness that drives me continuously back to God. And where am I the most happy? With God. When I reconnect, and I don't know about you, but I ain't reconnecting voluntarily. I'm not wired that way. It is my brokenness that drives me back to reconnect on a daily, weekly, monthly, yearly basis. I have to be reminded in my life that I have lack of power. So I will seek the power. I think God loves me enough to allow me to suffer enough to continue to seek Him. And it is the journey, and it begins in 10 and 11 with the inventory. It is the journey through inventory that lets me see that drives me into 6 and 7. I hope that I can stay good enough to stay sober and be useful to you. And remember, I am broken enough so I can continue to seek the power. That my powerlessness is not a problem, it is a pleasure. That my brokenness is not a curse, it is a gift. That my humanness is what it is. That is, again, as the author says, that I am trapped between angel and beast. The beast resents the angel resents the beast, and I will continue to seek the path to God. Thank you for letting me share.